get by. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sand. And right now, I feel like 100 grand.
You are listening to Inspired Insider with your host, Dr. Jeremy Wise.
Dr. Jeremy Weiss here, founder of InspiredInsider.com, where I talk with inspirational entrepreneurs and leaders. Today is no different. I'm here with Joe Shelerud of AdAdvance.com. And Joe, before I formally introduce you, I always like to point out other episodes people should check out. And since this is part of the top agency series, there's an episode I did with Ian Garlick, who runs VideoCaseStory.com. And he talks about some of the innovative marketing that he does, and also that his dad did for a restaurant that was in Wisconsin. Joe is also in a very cold climate like myself in Minnesota. And they had actually live dolphins in their restaurant. And they weren't in Orlando, they were in Wisconsin. So just some funny stories there. Check out the one I did with Todd Taskey. Todd Taskey also has a Second Bite podcast. He talks about how agencies sell their companies to private equity and get a second bite. And sometimes their second bite is more than the first bite. So we did an episode on valuation and how agencies sell and everything like that. So that's a great episode as well. And this episode is brought to you by Rise 25. In Rise 25, we help businesses give to and connect to their Dream 100 relationships and partnerships. And how do we do that? We actually help you run your podcast. We're an easy button for a company to launch and run a podcast. We do strategy, accountability, and full execution of a podcast. And, for me, Joe, the number one thing in my life is relationships. I'm always looking at ways to give to my best relationships. And I've found no better way over the past decade to profile the people and companies I most admire and share with the world what they're working on. So if you've thought about podcasting, you should. If you have questions, go to rise25.com and learn more. Happy to answer anything that you have. We have a good episode people like is the 5 different types of episodes every podcast should be creating, right? And Joe has a podcast too, which we'll talk about as well. And just to formally introduce Joe, Shelerud is co-founder and CEO of AdAdvance, and they're a digital advertising agency and Amazon Advertising Advanced partner. And Joe's career is not your normal trajectory. Like myself, like my background's in biochemistry and as a chiropractor. Joe took the hard route of engineering, which I would not wish upon anyone because I did take a lot of those physics-based calculus classes. But he pivoted eventually into the Amazon space after he started selling on Amazon back in 2014. And after scaling his own 7-figure brand, Joe and his business partner started their agency AdAdvance in 2017. So his company helps brands all over the globe grow and sell their products. And like I mentioned, he also hosts the Ad Project podcast about growing e-commerce brands. So Joe, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jeremy.
So talk about what you were selling on Amazon, because it has to relate to you. It relates to your industry that you're in too.
Yeah, exactly. So it's kind of funny how you end up in these different areas. Like you're saying with biochemistry, like I'm coming from the chemical engineering background, and now I'm a digital advertising marketer on Amazon. and
Who would have thought?
Yeah. And so it's kind of funny to look back. How I got started in Amazon is I've always been tinkering on different businesses. I mean, even starting, let's see, I was 6th grade. So 6th grade was actually my first business. So it was right when the internet was coming out. I started this site called jokecity.com. Taught myself how to code, taught myself HTML, and plugging away on my little dial-up connection. And essentially I was just copying other people's jokes from other sites and put up these banner ads. And it was in the early days of the internet. Made a couple $1,000s off the ads and learned a hard life lesson that you had to pay small business taxes even as a child.
The government came after you.
Yeah. So, it's been one business after the next. And what's kind of fun, and I really enjoy doing podcasts like this, is, you can always start or you can go on like what we're doing right now, but it's kind of fun to talk through the journey. So on the Amazon side,
well, stick there for a second, Joe. So what happened at Joke City? Did you just let the domain lapse? What happened with it? That's a
Yeah,
pretty
well,
good domain. I feel like you could have done something with that.
yeah. So it was joke hyphen city. There's a little hyphen in the
It's
middle.
fine.
Yep. And so back in the day, I had to save up my allowance, and it was like it was over $100 to register a .com domain, and then the hosting fees were not insignificant. So there was a lot of money going to that, and then it. I was into basketball, and then I played drums at the time. And so I made a hard life's priority switch that, I had to focus on my sports career.
Got it.
And so the site kind of lived on for a while, but then the hosting costs got too high. So that one died. Yeah. And then I don't know, it's kind of funny to just talk through. There's been so many different building blocks that have got to this point. When I was in college, I was really into brewing beer at home. I was doing that with a roommate. And so we started this business called Brew All Grain. And what it was is this temperature controller where the liquid would flow through, and then it goes on top of the grains, and then that extracts the starches and all the good stuff for the beer. And so we made these little like home controllers. And we built a website, we got our LLC, we got a bank account, we did everything. Then we built it, and we said, I wonder what happens if this like plugs off and the water stops flowing through. Plugged it off, and within a minute it was smoking and on fire. So it was like, okay, probably not ready for the big time yet. And so, that one failed, literally started on fire. And so, there were various other e-com businesses that came and went, but one that stuck was I heard about this thing on selling on Amazon. This is back in 2014. And so initially I was trying to think through, okay, what's key products that I could sell? As an engineering nerd, you go through organic chemistry class. And with organic chemistry class, there's these 3D models you get. And you can kind of map out different formations of molecules. So it's kind of think of like Legos for nerds, where you can build these little molecules.
I probably
but
bought
helps
those
give you
off
the 3D
Amazon.
structure. Yeah, and I'm sure you've had to do the exact same thing. So you can relate to the chair flip with cyclohexane and all that good stuff. And at the time it was like $80, and it just came from one of the major book providers, huge markup. And so it's like, there's probably an opportunity here. So went out, found a producer, set up the product, redesigned it, included better atoms that would go in to make the molecules, bunch of stuff there, and launched that business. And that one took off, and it was doing pretty good. And as I was growing that business, one piece that I had to start doing was advertising for myself on Amazon. So for those who aren't aware, there's a lot of sponsored ads that show up, and it can get your product to the top of the search page. And so I wanted to be ranked higher than some of these established molecular kits from the big bookstores. And so I'd advertise for myself. And as I was doing that, built up some tools for me that I thought were good at the time. Now it's kind of fun looking back and seeing what they were looking like at the time. But, at the time, they were pretty cool. And figured that, I could probably start helping some other sellers. And so that's really like the foundation of Ad Advance, and where it started. It was just fulfilling the need for myself for another business.
What mistakes do you find people make with advertising on Amazon?
Oh, yeah. So there's many mistakes that you can make with advertising on Amazon. I think a key one is honestly starting to focus on advertising too quickly. So from the start, you need a solid product. You need if you think of it kind of like with the corollary, which many people are probably can relate to, like on Google. So if I set up advertisements on Google and I send them to a landing page, but the landing page looks terrible and the messaging isn't clear on what I'm selling, and the form to submit doesn't even work, my advertising is not going to make sense. It's not going to work. It could be targeting, it could be set up perfectly, but if it's not going to convert after the click, I'm just wasting money. And so one mistake I see is people getting into advertising too quickly before really focusing on the product itself, focusing on how it looks on Amazon, making sure that it's going to convert well, making sure that it's a true competitor to what else is out there. And so one mistake is honestly getting in too early. You're wasting money and wasting time. And first, if you perfect that product, if you perfect that landing page, now when you run advertising, you can scale it really quickly. And it's kind of the same approach we took for Ad Advance too. So my co-founder, Matt, and I, for the first 2 years for our agency, we first focused on the product. So we built out the software and the tools and really fine-tuned the process and how we set up ads. Traditionally with an agency, you scale really quick and then you try to build up the tools as you go. We took the first 2 years and really focused on that product first. And then at that point, now we've got it. It's a repeatable process. It's working really well. It's tested. Now we can start to scale it. So kind of same corollary there.
Yeah. So people don't focus on totally optimizing their listing, which is, they're just going to be kind of flushing money down the toilet if they're sending someone to something that's optimized. I mean, I've been to, Amazon products I was going to buy, and it really didn't have much information. They don't have the right images there. They don't have the bullets that I'm looking for. And I just bounce off of that listing as a consumer standpoint. There's certain things I want to see. When it's totally optimized and it's answering all my questions, I buy it, right? So from you meet Matt, how do you meet Matt? And then I'd love to hear, you could have just kept going with the Amazon business and you decide to start an agency. So how did you meet Matt, first of all?
Yeah. So I was actually, when I was doing the Amazon business, I was still working full time actually as a project manager. So another career shift away from like traditional chemical engineering. Matt was just doing financial analysis. And so one key skill set I have is surrounding myself with the right people, and trying to be aware enough of where my strengths lie, but also really focusing on where my weaknesses are. And so I'm good at scaling systems. I'm good at building out the structure. What Matt is really good at is the detailed implementation. And so I saw him doing this where he was building out financial models that we could all use as product managers and kind of rolling this out to our entire org. So knowing my skill set, it's like, okay, I'm going to need somebody else there with me if I really want to build this. And so sat down with him and pitched the business, and he was really skeptical from the start, in all honesty. And so I did do pretty good to lay out my groundwork and my case for, why this was an idea, why it was an unserved need. And finally was able to sell him. And from that point, like the two of us together,
Joe, that you think that pushed him over the edge?
The skeptical,
because I think anyone listening, like they're always trying to recruit.
Sure.
Whether it's a small position or a big position or a partner or an advisor or investor, what pushed him over the edge?
Yeah. I think it was a combination of two things. And one was painting the vision on where we can take this, while also making sure that it seems attainable to the person that you're talking to. And in all honesty, the forecasts that I had that I presented to Matt were probably a lot lower than I thought that we could take the business, but I also wanted it to seem achievable to him, just coming from the outside and not being as familiar. And then the other piece is just trying to limit the risk as much as I could too. So in that instance, I wasn't asking him to quit his full-time job and jump into this. We set it up where we were able to start as a side gig, start building this up. And again, building that foundation and not being so focused on growth from the start that we could take our time to get it right on the front end. And then at that point, once we got to that system that we had that we could scale, now we could really invest, build out the team, and take a lot more risk and, and jump in full time.
At what point does Matt decide I'm going to jump in full time?
Yeah. So we both quit our jobs, and it was kind of, it was a scary situation too. Like, just for like personally for me, I was a project manager, solid job. My wife's a nurse, a labor and delivery nurse. We just had our third child, and we decided that we're going to go full time into this. And at the same time, we wanted to travel more with the family. And so a key driver was my oldest son. He was getting to the point where we had about 2 years before kindergarten started. We want to travel around and we want to just invest full time in this thing. So both myself and my wife quit our jobs at the exact same
Your
time
wife too.
with a 6-month-old and two other older kids. And so it was definitely a leap of faith. And the key thing that let us do that is we built the system, but then we were able to continually build on that. And I think one key thing is that we've always had clients from the start. And so it's not like we were building this in a vacuum. And so one key to success that I've seen is just jumping in and trialing it. You may not have everything figured out from the start, but you're going to learn so much more quickly when you're getting that real-time feedback. And throughout the process, still being fully transparent on, what your skill set is, where you're at with it. Like even today for clients, like there's new features rolling out all the time. And we'll be totally transparent, be like, hey, this is brand new. We haven't tried it before. And as long as they're in it for the test and to learn quickly, it's great. And so the key thing for us that allowed us to do that is we had clients from the start, we had a proven model, and now we just need to invest more time and go in full time on this. And it's worked out pretty well.
Did you have a goal, Joe? Like, I want to reach this certain, revenue level of the business before I quit?
Yeah. So we definitely had some financial milestones too, where we're a little bit more conservative. We bootstrapped our businesses from the start, so we've never taken out debt. We've been cash flow positive from the start. And so that was another key piece is like, all right, let's build up our savings to X. So we've got a couple of years of runway on this. And if it doesn't work out within that time period, you do those worst case scenarios. And it's like, all right, this doesn't work out. All clients leave right now. We have this amount of time to figure it out. And if not, worst case, we can probably find pretty solid jobs again.
Yeah.
And so, yep.
Nurses, I feel like, can
for
always
us,
find a job.
That is my fallback.
Like,
yep,
I'll stay at
nurses
home. You go
exactly
deliver babies. I mean,
Yep.
I God bless people who do that, because I remember in that labor and delivery, I'm like, I don't know how you do this. You deal with screaming people. It's chaotic all the time. Your wife must be like a patient person.
Yep, very to deal with me. Yeah, you have to be very patient. So I lucked out there for sure.
How did you get your first clients?
Yeah. So first clients that I got was on this platform called Upwork. And so it's a freelancing platform. And so for the initial clients I had, it was really pitching it on, hey, here's my skill set, and I'm a seller myself. I've built out these systems and I want to continue building them and utilizing them for our accounts. And so it was pitching it where, all right, I'm going to help optimize your accounts. And this was the really early days of Amazon too, where everything was really new. And so there wasn't a lot of tools out there. And so one cool approach that we took was those initial client relationships. It was like, all right, we're going to come in and we're going to be optimizing your accounts. But at the same time, it helps to fund that continued development in the tech and the software. And again, you learn really quickly when you're implementing these items. And as long as you have clients who are cool with that and understand where the industry is at, you can help. It's great because you get paid by them to, one, help them, but two, also build on your tech and your processes and your learning. So that's where our initial clients came from. And that was a great platform for a while to continue to build on those initial clients for the agency.
Talk about differentiation for a second, Joe, because if you're familiar with an Upwork, I mean, you have people from all over the world on Upwork with varying degrees of skill sets and varying degrees of pricing, right? And some people, I don't know now if that's the perception, but some people go to lower priced people. Some people want US based higher, if it's a higher quality. How do you differentiate on that platform when there's all these options, a marketplace of workers?
Yeah. So on that platform itself, I think it was trying to differentiate the technical ability and then also the process and the system that went into it. And I mean, what you're highlighting is exactly what we're seeing for the industry today. And it's actually a lot stronger today because there's so many more options. And so we had to constantly gut check ourselves on how are we truly different. some ways that we differentiate ourselves now is with the software and the tech that we've been able to build up, we're well known for being able to go a lot deeper than our competition. And we can say that, but we like to demonstrate it. And so we always take an education first approach to how we do our marketing. So like whether it's like LinkedIn posts, we do a ton of LinkedIn posts, or the podcast, or different videos or walkthroughs. We're constantly sharing what we're up to. A lot of our competition is a little bit more, they hold it a little closer. Whereas if we find something new, we're sharing it right away. There's pros and cons to that approach, because one is people follow us and then they see what we're doing, and then it's a lot easier to copy as you go. But our take on it is that if we're not communicating what we're doing, how's anybody going to know about it? And others are going to figure it out. It's not like we're the only smart people in the room. We may be a lot quicker and we may have the system and the structure, but other people are going to figure it out eventually. So we might as well communicate it out and be those people that people turn to try to find what's new, what's cutting edge, what's some really cool things that we can do. How can we implement this data? How can you take this really complex spreadsheet and turn it into something easily actionable for a seller who doesn't have all day to spend on advertising? And so that's one key way that we try to differentiate ourselves is through the education. But to do that education, you also need to be leading to be able to demonstrate that. And so it's really a focus on the tech being first, and then using that as a platform to educate people.
So I love that, Joe. Talk about some things that you've shared that maybe you were even hesitant to share because it could have given you an advantage, but you decided to share anyways for education's sake.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, so let's see. There's been multiple. I guess one that we've done. So one thing that we found is that we're from Minnesota. Minnesota is known as being Minnesota nice, like, and that there's not all nice people in Minnesota, but one thing we try to do is we try to hire a lot of like genuinely awesome human beings. And we're big believers in relationships. And one relationship we've been able to build up over time is with Amazon itself and the Amazon advertising group. There's constantly new features and betas that are coming through. And they're looking for early testers, just like we are with our clients, like which clients are really big into testing early. And so we get early access to a lot of these new features that are coming out. And so we always have to work with Amazon in exactly when they want us to communicate these items out. But like so Amazon just had this new release. It's called Amazon Marketing Stream. And up to this point, we could just see advertising data on a daily basis. Amazon Marketing Stream allowed us to break it into hour chunks. So really cool, because you can see the different shopping patterns throughout the day, and it varies quite a bit. So Jeremy, if you come in on Amazon and you click on an ad at 5 a.m. in the morning versus 3 p.m. in the afternoon, your intent to buy is going to change quite a bit between those two time periods. And so if we can take advantage of that, we can get a much better return on our advertising. And let's let our competition spend at 2 a.m. during the worst time of the day, and let's spend later in the day when people are more likely to convert. So there's two approaches we could have gone with that. Is one, we could have given these general updates and said, okay, high level, here's what's happening. And we have this machine learning model, which we do, that optimizes all these bids and everything, but we could have kept it really close. Instead, we put out different reports sharing our learnings and also sharing how sellers who say can't pay for our services or are already happy with who they're with right now, how they can implement those. And so they may not be able to optimize bids by the hour, but maybe you can just run your ads from 5 a.m. to 5 p.m. Pacific time, which is going to be the golden hours. And so we share that information. And so our approach is that.
So is that true? Are those the golden hours?
Yep. It's either 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., 5 to 6 o'clock, those 12-hour blocks, those are the golden hours to advertise for sure.
I love it.
Yep.
I'm wondering, you stay current, you go to different conferences like Prosper Show. What conferences, I mean, in addition to Prosper Show, do you attend? I'd love to hear maybe some takeaways from one of the conferences.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, so Prosper Show is always the biggest one in the Amazon space. Some ones that I was really excited about. Amazon put their first in-person conference together in a few years called Amazon Accelerate. It was in Seattle, and especially for the first conference, they did a great job putting it together. And it drew a ton of sellers in the space. And so it was so fun from that perspective to just talk and sit down like seller to seller and have the conversations. Because for some of these other conferences, it's gotten pretty vendor heavy. There's a lot of people like me walking around. Amazon Accelerate was an awesome one where it just drew in a ton of sellers coming in. And you just didn't get that vibe like everyone was trying to sell you something. So that one was great. There's Amazon Unboxed. There was Helium 10 last year that had the Sell and Scale conference. Sounds like that one's not going to be coming up this fall, but that was another really good one. It's fun. Any of these conferences are fun just because while Amazon is this monster ecosystem, when you go to these conferences, you see the same faces over and over again. And so it is this small, tight-knit community within this monster ecosystem. And I don't know, there's just so many genuinely awesome people at these conferences that it's so fun. And there's just nothing better than being able to sit down and talk in person. All the online stuff is great. But just being able to sit down and talk with these folks, like, I don't know, I genuinely enjoy these conferences just because there's so many awesome people in the space.
I love to hear, Joe, we talked about technology, you built your own technology, and what kind of technology that you look at to help your business. I do want to mention, people can check out the podcast I did with James Thompson. He's one of the founders of Prosper Show with Joe Hansen, and also Chad Rubin is one of the founding people, and Eitan Weiner, who also is one of the founding people of Prosper. It's a great show. So from a technology standpoint, Joe, what do you use? You built a proprietary system, it sounds like.
Yep. So we, again, like anything else with the business, we've gone through multiple iterations. So our first iteration was not like this fully built out software solution. It was all Excel based, and we taught ourselves VBA and macros in the background. Quickly started breaking workbooks, and so I had to scale up. So now we're fully hosted system, MySQL, Python based primarily. We have a lot of machine learning algorithms set up to try to optimize or predict future conversion rates or different items where we can switch bids up. We've got campaign funnel structures, which are constantly filtering down keywords, product targets. So, from our perspective, like what's been nice as founders is both Matt and I can get pretty technical. And so, for our development team, we can specify pretty specifically what we're looking for, where I know a lot of others have kind of struggled on that too, just because it's a different way of thinking once you get into the software side. And feel like that's really helped us out, especially as the world has transitioned to more and more data. Like when I started in Amazon, it was infinitely like easier than what it is now, just because there's so many more tools out there. So I think just our DNA being kind of like tech, data, software first has really helped us to be able to pull out the insights and the items that we need to help feed into the education that we're putting out or how we optimize accounts for our clients.
Yeah. I mean, I think, Joe, it's a unique perspective and thought process on building a company, because not everyone is going to want to build a technology, right? At all. And so I'd love to hear the evolution of your hiring. So it's you and Matt. Who are the next people that you decide to bring on, and what positions?
Yeah. I mean, so the major initial hires that we had were actually on the development side in the early stages. And then I had one other person, actually two other people who came over from my Amazon selling account to start helping us out on the advertising side. And so that's grown into like full-time positions on the advertising side, but it was awesome having people with the seller experience from the start. And then also the development side. And so our first hires were not account managers, like to work with clients. It was Matt and I working with clients. It was Matt and I starting to develop and working on the software because we could see what the clients were looking for. Okay, here's what we want. We're getting really annoyed with having to pull all these Excel reports all the time. Like, hey, can we develop this integration with the API so we can get these reports all the time? And hey, we're getting really annoyed that we're having to push all these bid updates every day. Can we build that out? And things just kept building there. So really, it was the developer side. It was bringing up over a couple people from my other team on the seller side. And then at that point, it was a couple of years down the road that we hired our first account manager here in Duluth, Minnesota. And since that point, we've taken kind of a unique approach where we just hire locally. We're definitely going against the grain where those initial folks on our team are working remotely, but everybody else who is new is actually in the area, in person, in the office. So definitely taking a counter approach to where many people are going with remote work right now.
So what made you decide to do that?
So the key thing is we went through a couple of solid tests through the COVID period. And I guess the initial test that we had is initially we were a remote company, especially as my family was traveling and Matt was working here and also traveling. Matt and I would get together, say like once a month, and we would sit down for that day in person. And the breakthroughs that we would have in that single day just completely blew away the rest of the month. And it was really eye-opening. And I don't know what it was other than just being in person that whole time and giving yourself enough time to really like reach those next steps. Maybe that's what it was. But it was at that point where I was personally really hesitant. I love the remote side. But we ended up working at kind of like it was Regis. It's kind of like a WeWork spot here.
I was just in one in Arizona. Yeah, it's great.
Sure. Yep. And we rented our first office, and it was this 10 by 10 office where Matt and I were sitting in it every day together. And that's where the business really started to take off, is once we were in person. And what we found is that just trying to develop the culture, and we have to move really quickly in the digital advertising agency because it's constantly changing, and trying to do that remotely or training new people remotely was so much more difficult than everybody being in person. And you overhear different conversations. You can just shout across the room to somebody else. The interaction and the collaboration that you get in person just seems to be so much more solid and meaningful. There's definite cons to it, including, all the janitorial work and things that I get to do on the side every once in a while in the office. But at the same time, like there's so many major pros that we've seen: the culture, the training, the being able to respond quickly. Those are all major pieces that we've seen, which has driven us to kind of go against the grain there.
I know being an engineer, you're a systems person. I love to hear when you onboard a hire, what does it look like from a training perspective?
Sure. Yeah. And when we onboard a hire, and this took me a little while to get to too, just being an engineer, I love black and white things. And culture is always so fuzzy. So I remember being in culture training in like previous jobs, and it's like, okay, what does this all mean? Like, just give me the numbers and the facts and I'll go with it from there because I'm an engineer. So before even the onboarding piece, like, skills are awesome, but I can teach skills. I have a much harder time teaching a way of approaching things or the culture that somebody brings, the perspective, the drive. Like, I can't teach somebody who wants to constantly trying to be seeking to figure new things out or pushing themselves. And so the first thing that we really do is focus on those right aspects that we feel like is going to lead to a long-term success. And then we know we can build on the skills. And so when they get in the office, like, we have a very structured training system. So from a system standpoint, like, it's a list of, I don't know, it's like 90 some things. We actually pared this down quite a bit because it got really crazy. But it's 90 some things that we need to go through with them. We assign every new person a mentor. And with our collaborative culture, one key thing we really try to do is get them as much experience as we can early on. Because without that hands-on experience, it's really tough to tie these concepts together. So our perspective is jump in, let's get going. And as you work through things, you're going to get up to speed so much quicker than sitting in a training room for 6 months and then trying to come out once we decide that we've reached that elite bar and then start actually going through it. So we jump in really early, obviously with major oversight, and we have our mentors and our managers, and we have Matt and I that are in different parts of the training. But our key perspective is like, let's have the structure, but at the same time, let's get ways that they can get their hands dirty really quickly. And that's going to really help to connect the dots for all these different pieces where if you're just sitting in a classroom environment, it's going to be much harder to try to tie everything together.
Yeah. Joe, how do you, from a hiring perspective, how do you hire for the approach you want and drive? What do you build into that hiring process?
Yeah. I mean, so one unique thing is that most of our hires have been directly recommended from people within our organization. And so, I mean, it's a good thing, one, that people would feel confident to recommend our organization to their friends. But two, people who are here know what it's going to take to succeed. And we have a very fast moving work culture. We have a very transparent and open work culture, and some people will thrive in that, others will not. And so that's the initial stage, or the initial step is reaching out to our network here and seeing who's out there that's looking for a role change that we feel like would be a good fit. And so if we get that recommendation internally, we're already feeling a lot better, really good about where we're sitting from the start. And then the key items is just really, we do a lot of behavioral interview type questions. And this is pretty standard, but we really try to tune them towards our work style. So from the engineering standpoint, like Matt and I can be pretty blunt with each other, and we feel like it just kind of cuts to the core of the issue right away. Sometimes we have to be careful too, because, there's these emotion things that tie into it. Yeah. And so like, we try to dig into like, okay, how well can people take feedback? Like, give me instances where you're truly driven. Give me instances where you took that extra step when you didn't have to. Give me instances where you supported the team where you weren't expected to. These are all items that we're looking for and that we need for our culture to thrive. And so we really try to dig deep into that. And if we're not, some are always a slam dunk where it's like, okay, I know these are definite and they're good, but there's others that are a lot more of a question. And so then we'll just sit there and we'll just focus on those areas until we feel like we have a solid understanding on, all right, in taking feedback or in that drive or in that collaboration. We'll dig deep until we feel like we have an understanding, and sometimes explicitly ask or state in the interview too, like, here's my key concern, my question. Do you have other examples for it? So it's digging deep, but then knowing where our values are to try to dig deep into each of those.
Yeah, thanks for that. I love that. The behavioral interview questions is really helpful. You mentioned when you're onboarding someone, you may have 90 items or whatever it is. I'd love to hear what your tech stack looks like internally from an agency standpoint. What are you using from project management and other tools internally?
Sure. Yeah. So we use like an e-learning system. We're within the Zoho platform, and looking at a lot of these, they're all pretty similar. So we were using that for a while. We found that it got quickly outdated. And so we actually took a step back. And so for our training program, it's not this complex technical training program whatsoever. It's a list of major topics. And then if we have resources put together, here's where it's at. But if not, you're sitting down and you're talking with somebody about it, and they're explaining with real life examples, hopefully what they're doing today, on how these tie in. So from a tech perspective, it's probably going to be the least impressive side of our business. But it's the structure that goes into it. And then it's that personal connection. We could have these awesome training modules for everything, but Some people really resonate with them. People like me do not. And I tend to zone out for a lot of those. And so what we find is more if we can sit down, and it takes a lot more person time. But we feel like that in-person time helps to scale long-term versus giving them all the e-learning, but then not having the concepts click. And so, yeah, it's kind of a structured set of topics. If we have resources available, we'll point them to those. But a lot of it is that in-person time. And then we always, like right now, we've hired, it's awesome when you can hire in at least pairs. And then you have two people at the exact same point in the training process too. And so they're a resource for each other because somebody might have grasped a topic, the other person didn't. So we've had a lot of success with that too.
Do you still use internal communication tools like Slack, even though it's in person, or what do you use for those things?
Yeah. So we were on Slack. We switched it to Teams just because we're very Microsoft based. Pretty much same thing. There's pros and cons for each. So we use that quite a bit for internal communications. And so being in the office, you have to respect that there's times where people need to just put their heads down and crank through things. And not everything needs to be walking up to their desk and just starting to talk about it. So Teams or Slack is great for kicking over those items. Hey, I had to share with the team, just an FYI, but I don't want to interrupt you. So we use that for all internal communications, and great tool, great spot for it, even though we're sitting right next to each other. There's many times where I don't feel the need to turn to the side and interrupt somebody. If it's just a quick update or things that aren't immediate.
I love to highlight exactly what you do at Advance, and anyone can check out, obviously the website. It's adadvance.com. You had someone in the fitness space. And what did you do with them?
Yeah. So we've got a couple of fun like client examples. So one, I think I like this one so much just because it kind of reminded myself of me in my early seller days too. So we were connected on Facebook, and he was following along with the content that we were putting on. And at the time, he was working full time. His wife was working full time, and he was doing Amazon as a side gig. Just what I was doing too. And for him, what we really focused on is there's two major ad groups within Amazon advertising. So there's sponsored ads, and these primarily all show up on Amazon. There's a couple nuances. I won't get into those. But just think of the ads on Amazon to help you sell your products. And so this is where Amazon advertising started. And so with sponsored ads, what we can do is we can make sure if somebody types in a search term. So let's take like running clothes, for instance. If somebody types in running hat, we can make sure that your product shows up on top and gets more exposure by running this ad, the sponsored ad. So if you're on Amazon, you'll see all the sponsored ads popping up to the side. And so what we did with him is we worked to really scale his brand with his fitness equipment throughout these ads. And so whether it was targeting certain keywords or search terms, or targeting some of his competitors, you can actually put ads on your competitors' product detail pages. And if your products are better than your competitors, like his was, you can tend to start to draw more sales that way. And so through the advertising and all the efforts that he had, and, I'll just emphasize this, like we manage one small part of people's accounts. But we were able to help him scale to the point where he was able to quit his job. And then eventually his wife was also able to quit her job too. And so it was so cool and fulfilling to see that we were just even a small part of that. When you can look at this from a business standpoint, you can look at the dollars and the figures and everything, but this is people's lives and their hard work that goes into it. And so that's really like some of the really fun, cool experiences when you can see that direct impact that what you have that cascades to others. That's really a fulfilling piece. So that was a fun one where he was able to scale his business. Our ads were a small part of that helped him build that up. To where he and his wife could quit their jobs.
So for you, what does an ideal client look like for you?
Yeah. So it shifted over the years. So initially we were really focused and only focused on people selling on Amazon. So there were these sponsored ads, and really the only way to use them were people selling on Amazon. But recently, Amazon's launched this other product called it's Amazon DSP, and it's Amazon display ads. So for anybody advertising on Google, it's like the Google equivalent of display ads just on Amazon. And some really powerful things is that, if you look at advertising data, Google is looking at your search behavior, and they're trying to tie that into what you're going to buy. If you look at Facebook, they're trying to take your social behavior and turn that into what you're potentially interested in or going to buy. For Amazon, what's really cool is that it's actually what you're buying. And so you can get these very targeted audiences who are going to be very interested in your ads. And so one fun instance that we've had is we've been able to use Amazon's advertising, and these ads show up offsite. So if you've ever been on like weather.com or any other sites and you see Amazon's listings that kind of follow you around, those are Amazon ads. But we're able to advertise for companies that are not on Amazon. So one instance is we're advertising for this nationally known insurance company. And we had to advertise for individual agents in different geolocations. And so at one point we had to upload 38,000 different creatives for these different ads. So kind of how the ads show up into the system. And we're able to do this through our software. So while it took some time to develop it, it's not as big of a deal for us because we have the software to do it. But once we uploaded these 38,000 creatives, Amazon reached out and they said, "Hey, you just crashed our system. We've never experienced this amount of creative uploads." And we had to work through it with them for a day or two. They were able to work it out, and we're constantly pushing the bounds of their system. But what's so fun about this is with the insurance agency, from like a cost per acquisition standpoint, we're hitting one of the lowest marks that they have outside of any channel. And the key way we're able to do that is just from the audience targeting that we're able to get on Amazon. And we're just able to get deeper too with our technology, where we can get much more targeted and fine-tuned to the people that we're showing these ads to, and then also where they're shown. So a fun instance. So just so you know, if you're listening to this, Amazon advertising is not just for Amazon sellers. If you are a digital advertising spender, if you're spending on Google or Meta, you should definitely consider Amazon too, just because they have a lot of awesome targeting options. And then they also have some really unique supply sources for your ads.
And then people are watching the video. There is, obviously you could be listening to the audio, but there's a video here. We're on advance.com, and then we're on the Amazon DSP page. Is there anything we should point out here for people to know?
I think the key thing, so we talked about the audiences. The other cool piece is Amazon has brought in all these other companies to help build on where you can show ads. So whether it's Prime Video, Thursday Night Football is huge. So Amazon just purchased the rights to show Thursday Night Football. Through Amazon's DSP, you can now show your advertisements on Thursday Night Football. They own Twitch, so the big video streaming service. They bought IMDb, so IMDb TV, which was rebranded to Freevee, if you've heard of Freevee before. So there's a ton of different sources where you can also show ads on Amazon, using Amazon's platform. So not on Amazon, but using throughout their other companies. So lots of cool ways to utilize the platform. And I think a lot of people just don't understand that you can advertise with Amazon ads, even though you're not an Amazon seller. I think once more people determine that, they're going to take full advantage of the platform.
I love it. Joe, first of all, thank you. I'm going to be the first one to thank you. I want everyone can check out advance.com to learn more. Check out more episodes of the podcast. And thanks everyone for listening. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you, Jeremy. This is awesome.
What I got, you can't buy. It resides between my eyes. Walked through the fire, came out better on the other side. See, life's like a beach if you find the sailing right now. I'm feeling like $100 grand.